the unprecedented attack on Hezbollah by Israel lacing their old school pagers and walkie-talkies with explosives it's unbelievable. The reaction to it has been even more remarkable. I want you to watch Ben Shapiro talking about the ridiculous reaction, which proves how disingenuous Israel's critics are. Have a watch.
You're seeing people out today, the Edward Snowdens of the world, who effectively is a Russian agent and always has been, suggesting that this is a danger to the world, what Israel did. No, it most assuredly is not. It is the most targeted military operation in history. You don't have to worry that your iPhone is going to blow up in your pocket because, number one, you don't work for Hezbollah. And number two, your iPhone does not have the components necessary to blow up in your pocket. That's not how this operation was carried out. When you see tool bags like the editor of Current Affairs tweeting, Israel had absolutely no idea who would be standing nearby when these beepers exploded. No, they had a pretty good idea because the beepers are on the bodies of the terrorists. It turns out you don't get a beeper in the year 2024 unless you are a Hezbollah terrorist in Lebanon. How many beepers have you seen recently? I understand that there might be some retro folks who are still using beepers from 1998. Let's just say this is not a device in general use. And the reason that all of these Hezbollah terrorists were carrying around beepers is because back in February, Israel had so thoroughly hacked Hezbollah's communications networks via things like iPhones that Hezbollah's terror chief, Hassan Nasrallah, he had actually told his people to stop using modern devices and go back to a beeper system. This is one of the things that terrorists in Hamas and Hezbollah do. These mass rapists and murderers, one of the things that they do is they go low-tech in order to avoid high-tech surveillance. There is only one problem, which is that Mossad is really, really good at what they do. So here is what happened. According to the Wall Street Journal, pagers carried by thousands of Hezbollah operatives exploded at about the same time Tuesday afternoon. In what appeared to be an unprecedented attack, authorities had injured almost 2,800 people and killed 9 across Lebanon. Many of the affected pagers were from a new shipment the group received in recent days, people familiar with the matter said. A Hezbollah official said many fighters had such devices, adding some people felt the pagers heat up and disposed of them before they burst. Hezbollah said a number of the pagers carried by its members exploded simultaneously at 3:30 p.m. local time. It couldn't immediately be determined what caused the blasts, which were spread out across the country in several areas where Hezbollah has a heavy presence. Now again, normies don't carry beepers. The reason these people were carrying beepers is because they were handed them by the Hezbollah higher-ups. At some point in the supply chain, Israel must have interdicted ordering the production process. Interdicted these particular beepers, knowing that they were going to be handed out to the Hezbollah fighters. This must have been done months, if not a year in advance. And put some sort of small explosive, like just a couple of grams of explosive, plus some material near the battery, such that when the battery was prompted by code to heat up, it exploded the small amount of explosive that was in the pager. Now, the reason that I suggest that many balls were blown off here and that there will be many unsatisfied 72 virgins in heaven, apparently, is because, of course, men tend to wear their beepers near that area. If you got your beeper in your pocket, yeah, that would be the issue. Hezbollah and the Lebanese government blamed Israel for the attack. Both said civilians were killed. Okay, well, in any military operation in an urban area, civilians will be killed. If the terrorists wounded and killed to civilians wounded and killed ratio is on the order of, say, 500 to 1, that would make this the most successful targeted operation in the history of urban warfare. By far, it's not even close. If Israel had sent precise snipers into Lebanon to kill Hezbollah terrorists at this scale, many more civilians would have died than in this particular operation, just from the ricochets alone. It turns out warfare is really ugly and really bad. If you could carry out a targeted operation where literally the only people carrying the devices work for Hezbollah, and you blow up the devices, there is no more targeted operation that is possible. It is not even possible to target it anymore, which is why when you see people who are now expressing outrage at the operation, understand what they're outraged at is Israel defending itself. That's all. They're not outraged at the human cost of war. If they were, they would have been outraged by the 8,000 rockets that are being indiscriminately fired into Israel by Hezbollah. They'd be outraged by the fact that the Houthis are shooting missiles into the middle of Israel. You don't see any of that outrage. Hell, they'd be outraged about what's going on in the Congo. They're not. The reason they're upset is because Israel is good at what it does. And actually, Israel's discriminateness makes them more upset. Because the more discriminate Israel is, the more it demonstrates that Israel actually does care about human life way more than its enemies do. This is one of the things that boggles so many minds about the war in Gaza. Israel has pursued the single most humane war in the history of warfare in Gaza. Now, humane war is inevitably a bit of an oxymoron because war is never humane. But if you are going to pursue a war, telling people in advance that you are about to come into an area, helping to evacuate those areas, providing food to the people who leave those areas, using precise targeted munitions on specific terrorists such that the terrorist to civilian death ratio is 1.6 to 1. That is the most humane war it is possible to fight. Now, there's no such thing, again, as a fully humane war, because the most humane war is the one that doesn't get fought. But it turns out that when a terrorist group overruns a boundary and kills 1,200 people and takes 250 hostages and murders hostages in tunnels and continues to fire rockets and continues to flood the zone with military munitions, it turns out that that tends to provoke a war. So the actual answer to stopping this war would be to let Israel finish the war. It turns out, by the way, that the best way to achieve peace in the Middle East is through victory. This happens to be true in every military conflict. The best way to achieve peace is victory. This has always been true. Always. Folks, the best way to achieve peace in the Middle East is through victory. And it turns out that the best way to achieve economic prosperity.
So I want to stop there and just talk about one of the last things that Ben said. So he's right that, Israel has been so surgical in targeting terrorists, and it's much more challenging in Gaza. And frankly, it's challenging in Lebanon. But Israel managed to do this incredible operation by lacing explosives in the old school walkie-talkies and pagers, which were clearly going to Hezbollah operatives who were trying to escape Israeli surveillance. And he's right to say that the people who are still criticizing Israel for this have proved themselves simply to be upset with Israel's very existence, which is the oldest story in the book. There's always been people who have been unhappy with the Jewish people's existence. But there was one thing he said which I would slightly amend. He said that, the most humane war is one that isn't fought. Well, first of all, sometimes it is, unfortunately, the humane thing to fight a war. To get rid of terrorists, to get rid of people that are threatening people's lives, who are plotting to kill, annihilate others, to terrorize them. That's humane, getting rid of it. We've got to stop using this language of anything that's violent, anything that involves killing is unhumane. Yes, of course, we'd much rather a world where there is no hate and there is no fighting and conflict. But the fact is, to say no war, I'm sure Ben would agree with me, by the way, but I'd just like to clarify the language. It is the humane thing to do to kill terrorists. That's point number one. And point number two, and just in terms of humaneness, one thing that's starting to crop up in the conversation is people are starting to wonder, yes, Israel's been extremely surgical in Gaza in getting rid of Hamas, but at what cost? At the cost of Israeli soldier lives, which are just as valuable as everyone else's lives. It's done on the altar of protecting Gazan civilians who by and large support Hamas on October 7th. And thirdly, even for the civilians in Gaza, even for people who are innocent, is a longer war better for them? It's like doing a long surgery, a bit here, a bit there. There are people who are starting to wonder, including people who are halachic Jews, rabbis, who are suggesting that Judaism says that part of a humane war is one that's fought quickly, which perhaps may be more comprehensive, which perhaps may be felt more by civilians, but it will be over faster and allows for moving on, rebuilding to begin faster as well. So those are just thoughts to think about, because when we use language of humane and inhumane and all these things, it's important we stop to actually think, well, actually, what kind of action really produces the outcome that we wish, the most humane outcome. Hi, thank you so much for watching. To watch another one, click here. To stay up to date with all our content, click here to subscribe. And if you're able to, you can help support JTV to grow and grow by clicking join below this video, where you can become a member and get perks including early access to videos and private live discussions with me. But most of all, you'll be partnering with us on our mission to change the world.